Welcome back to another project. In this project, we're going to create a dice roll simulator. As you can see from the final version of the project, we have a dice at the middle and we have a button saying roll dice. If you click on this button, this is going to create an animation first and then create a random dice and show it here in the middle. And also we have added this roll dice inside this list, the history list. So let's do it again. This time we got 5 and we have added to the list as well. So as you can see, we have just styled this one using CSS with a modern design. And also we have used JavaScript to add an event listener to this button, which is going to create and simulate a dice roll by creating a random number. And also we're going to save these numbers inside an array and show it here in the history of the roll dice. So in the next section, we're going to firstly start with the HTML part of the project. And then we're going to work on the CSS. And after that, we're going to work and add functionality to this project using JavaScript. So see you in the next section. All right, let's start our project. In this section, we're going to work on the HTML part of the project. As you can see, I have put the final version here for our comparison. As you can see, we have to add a heading, a roller dice here, and also we have a button for rolling the dice. And finally, we have the roll history. So we're going to save this one here in the history. So the first things we need to do is to create an HTML file. So I'm going to create the project in my desktop. So I'm going to create a folder here. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this folder the name of our project, which is Dice Roll Simulator. And once you create this folder, you can just right click and click on Open with Code. This is going to open it inside the Visual Studio Code. Otherwise, you can just come to the Visual Studio Code and just click on the Open and click on that folder that you have created by clicking on the Open folder. So now the Visual Studio Code is having this Dice Roll Simulator folder as a default folder. Now we can create a new file here by clicking on this icon and we call that file index.html. And now we have the HTML file, but it is completely empty. Let me close this. But now we can use an exclamation mark to have an HTML boilerplate. As you can see from the Emmet abbreviation, we get this suggestion by just writing down an exclamation mark. And then when you click on the first auto suggestion, you get the HTML5 boilerplate. So let me explain this one real quick, as if this is your first project. So we have here doc type, which tells the browser which version of HTML we are using. As we are using HTML5, we just need to have HTML here. And after that, we have an HTML tag, which covers the head and the body section. The length attribute here inside the opening tag of the HTML sets the language of the page and tell the browser which language the page is written in, and in our case is English. And then we have the head tag, which covers 3 metadata tags and also a title tag. The first metadata tag sets the charset attribute, which tells the browser to use UTF-8, and UTF-8 is recommended by HTML5 because it nearly contains all the characters and symbols, so the users inside our website won't have any problem seeing the characters or symbols or Unicodes that we are using. And then we have the compatibility metadata tag, which tells the Internet Explorer browser to use the most recent rendering engine, which is Edge. Then we have the viewport metadata tag, which tells the browser to set the width of the screen to device's width. For example, if you're using mobile screen, the width is going to be smaller, so you can have a responsive website by setting this metadata tag, and it's necessary to have a responsive behavior. And then finally, we have the initial zoom level of the browser, which is 100%. Then we have set the title to be document, This is the title of the page, and let me show you the title. If you have installed the live server extension in your Visual Studio Code, you have this button, Go Live. So you can click on Go Live, and this is going to open the website inside the default browser, which in our case is Google Chrome. As you can see, we have the document here as our title, and then we can just change this title to the name of the project, which is Dice Roll Simulator. So now if you check the browser, the title is going to be Dice Roll Simulator. So now let's bring the website to the right side, and then the Visual Studio Code on the left side, so you can see the changes in real time. Because we are using the live server extension, anything we write here, we're gonna see in real time on the right side. So inside the body section, we're going to have an h1 tag saying Dice Roll Simulator. So after just a few seconds and auto saving the project, you can see the Dice Roll Simulator heading inside the website. And after this h1 tag, we're going to have a div with the class of dice and also with the ID of dice. So for adding the class, you just need to have dot, and for the ID, you just need to write down a pound sign, and then you get the auto suggestion from Emmet abbreviation, a div with the class of dice and an ID of dice. If you press enter, you get that div. Now inside this div, I'm gonna add this icon, which is the dice face 1. So in order to find this, they have some Unicode. If you search on Google, let me search for you. So we just say, for example, dice Unicode. Dice Unicode. There are plenty of websites showing you the Unicode characters of this. You can just go, for example, this compart.com. As you can see, we have, for example, Unicode for the 5. So for the HTML entity, the code is this. So just if you copy this code, for example, you just put it inside this div, this is going to show the 5 dice. So you don't need to just get the icon. You just need to have this kind of HTML unities. And if you want, for example, this is for die face 5, you can just copy this and search for die face 1, for example, and then you just click here and then get the code from here. Okay, so let's continue. So let's remove the zoom level. So the icon is here, but we cannot see it yet. But later, using CSS, we're going to increase the size of these things and make them more beautiful. Then we have a button. The button has an ID of roll button, and inside the button we're gonna say roll dice. So you can see the button here, and after the button we're going to have the history, like here we have the history. I'm gonna just create a UL unordered list with the ID of roll dash history. So we're going to use this ID or classes to later using CSS or JavaScript to manipulate the website and style it. So we have the UL with the ID of roll history, and then we have an LI here. I just want to hard code some LI. For example, the first one, we just want to say roll 1, and then we just have an span. This span is going to have that, for example, this code here. And then we can just have another one, for example, roll 2, and we just, for example, get the 5 1. So we have 1 and 5. This is just hard coded because we want to style this one using CSS in the next section. We need some data here to style it, but later we're going to create this one using JavaScript. So if we roll more dice, and then we can just see the history here, for example, like the one here. So you see that each time you see a new history data and add it here. So that was it for the HTML part of the project. In the next section, we're going to work on the CSS and make the website as beautiful as the final version. As you can see here, we have a hover effect for the button, and we have this title, and also we have this style like a buck shadow effect for these row histories. So see you in the next section for the CSS part of the project. Alright, in the last section we have completed the HTML part of the project. In this section we're going to style the project like the one in the final version using CSS. The first thing we need to do is to install and create a new CSS file inside our Explorer section. So I have to open the Explorer section using Ctrl+Shift+E, and here inside the Explorer section, inside our folder which is called Dice Lore Simulator, we just create a new file and we call it a style.css. And before using this file, we need to add a link to this file within the HTML code. So we need to come back to the index.html, and then just after the title tag inside the head section, we need to add a link to the CSS file. As you can see from getting this suggestion, you just can write down link and then click on the third auto suggestion, the one with the CSS. Let me turn off my GitHub Copilot. All right. So now we have a link, which is a relationship between the HTML file and the style sheet style.css. And here the style.css is the address of this file. And as both files are located at the same directory, we just need to have a style.css here. Now we can start styling our project here. Now I want to start with the body section, so which is covering everything. I want to change the font family to Open Sans. Should be capital. So Open Sans is like this, and if the Open Sans is not available, we're gonna say use this sans serif instead. So this is a backup font. After that, I want to bring everything to the center using text align center like this, and then let's remove the default margin of the page, and we set it to be 0 so we can style it better. So we have completed the body section. Let's move on and go to this H1 tag saying Dice Roll Simulator. So we just target that one using H1 and open a set of curly braces. And here we just change the font size first to change the size of the font, as we set it to be 3 rem, which is 3 times of the base sizing. And mostly its default sizing is 16 pixels, but it depends on how you set your browser. If I remove the zoom level, which is 200% now, this is the size that we have created by creating 3 rem. And then I want to add some margin at the top of 2 rem. So we bring it a little bit down from the top. And after the H1 tag, I want to target this dice here, this div with the class of dice, which is having this dice here. So let's target that one. Because this is a class, we can just say dot dice, and let's just change the font size to be 7 rem, so make it bigger. Then let's add some margin of 5 pixels here, so you add some space around this dice. I'm gonna add the animation later. As you can see from the final version, when we change the dice, some animation happens. But if we don't have the ability to change the dice, we cannot see the animation. So I'm gonna, after creating the JavaScript, I wanna come back and create that animation. I'm gonna teach you how to create a cool animation like this. So let's move on and let's go to the next section, which is the button. So we target the button, we just say button. So the button, we want to have the background color for that. The background color I want to add is this code 47A5C4, which is kind of bluish color. And then let's change the color of the text to be white. You can just simply write down white, or hashtag FFF would be similar. And then let's change the font size to be 1.5 rem. And then let's add some padding. So padding in the top and bottom, I just write down 1 rem. And for the left and right, we just write down 2 rem like this. And then we can just border, remove the border here because I don't want this black color around it. Instead, I want to add some, so we just remove the border for now. We add some border radius. We make it rounded in the corners by just adding a border radius. We set it to be 1 rem like this and set the cursor to be pointer. So when we hover over it, we see a pointing hand. And yeah, that was it for this, creating this. Let's add some transition effect and hovering effect for it. So when we hover over the button, we just add a pseudo class hover. We just change the background color to be different, which is 2E8BAS. And then we can add some transition. So when we hover over it, we don't see it suddenly. So we can add a transition on background color with 0.3 seconds and ease effect. So you can see now the changing is a little bit slower. So after that, we're going to target this UL here. This UL with the idea of role history, we can just target the UL. Let's remove these dots. So we just have to target the list style to be 1.5 rem. Sorry, this is the list style should be none. So you remove that dot and then we remove the padding. We just say padding 0. So they come in the center. When you remove the list style, you need to set the padding to 0. And then we set some margin of 2 rem. So we add some space around it and we set the maximum width of that to be 600 pixels. And we set the margin of left and right to be auto. So we bring them exactly in the center. Okay. So now, this one is necessary. We can just set this one to 2 rem for top and bottom. Okay, now we just target the li, the list, each list. So we target the li. We set the font size first to 1.5 rem. So make it bigger. We add some padding of 0.5 rem, margin of 0.5 rem, padding the space inside, and margin is the space outside the element. And then we have some background color, F2, 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 which is kind of gray color. We add some border radius, we make it rounded in the corner, and then we set this one to 0.5 rem. We also want to add some box shadow so we can see it better. The box shadow is going to have a 0 for the x-axis, 2 pixels for the y, offset, 2 pixels for the blurriness, and then we can have some RGBA color, which is a red, green, and blue color. For the red, I just set it to be 0, green 0, blue 0, so this is going to give us a black color. For the alpha, which is the transparency, I just set it to be 0.3% transparent. As you can see, it's a beautiful now box shadow. And then we wanted to set the display to flex. So I want the rule 1 to be in the left side and this icon on the right side. So I set the display to flex. And then I want to set the justify content to be a space between. So add a space between the two elements. And finally, we can use align item center to bring them to the center vertically like this inside the container. And then finally, I want to make this icon, this dice symbol to be bigger. So we can target that one, this span here. So we just target that one. We just say li span. We set the font size to be 3 rem. And then we just set some margin on the right side of 1 rem. Okay, it looks fine. Let's make it bigger. So as you can see, it has some maximum width of 600. So it never gets bigger than that. The button looks good. And also this dice looks fine. All right, so that was it for the CSS part of the project. I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. In the next section, we're going to work on the functionality and we make it like the final version. So each time we add we click on the roll dice, we get the new roll dice randomly and then add it inside our list here. So see in the next section for the JavaScript part of the project. Alright, in the last section we have completed the CSS part of the project. We have styled the project. Now it's time to add functionality to the project using JavaScript. The first thing we need to do is to create a JavaScript file inside our Visual Studio Code. So here I'm going to open the Explorer section using Ctrl+Shift+E, and here we can click on this icon to create a new file. I'm going to call the file index.js. Similar to the one we did for the style.css, we have to add a link to this file within the HTML code, but the link should be at the end of the body section, as we need the file, the HTML, to be loaded first, and then we need to add the functionality to it. So we need to add a script tag here. We just write down SC and we can click on the second auto suggestion, the one with the src, and the address for this script tag would be index.js, as both files are located at the same directory. So let's close this and let's start adding some functionality. The first things I want to do is to add the animation. So when in the final version, when we click on this roll dice, we have an animation. So we want to add this one. First, we want to add an event listener to this button, which is going to trigger an animation. So let's bring this one to the right side and this one to the left side. So now what we want to do, you go to index.html. So what we want to add event listener to this button with the ID of roll button. So when we click on it, something happens. So first thing first, we want to bring this button to the JavaScript. So we want to create a constant called button element, and this is going to be equal to document. Let me stop the Copilot. So we just target the document because we want to target all the browser, and then we can use getElementById method to target the ID that we have here, which is roll button. We can copy this and then paste it inside here. Now we have access to the button. Let's add the event listener to it. So we just say button element.add event listener, and the event we want to add is click, because when we want to click, we want to trigger something. So what we want to do, we want to create a function here. So this function is going to be triggered once we click on it. For example, if I console log something here, for example, clicked, and now if you open the console using F12, let's bring this one down. So now if I click on the button, you see the clicked is logged inside the console, but instead of clicking, I want to add an animation to this element, to this dice element here. So first we need to add the animation inside the CSS. So if you remember, inside the dice, we didn't add any animation, but we have to create an animation here, and we need to name an animation. So I'm going to create an animation class. We just call it roll-animation, and this one is going to have an animation name, which is going to be roll. And now we create this animation with keyframe. So we add a keyframe. This keyframe is going to be the name of that we have created here, roll, and it starts from 0 to 100%. For the 0%, we're going to have a transform, which is going to have some change inside the, in the x-axis, in the y-axis, but we want to rotate it in y-axis. So we just say rotate y. First we start with 0 degree, and for this rotate x, we start from 0 degree too. Then when we reach to the 100%, we want to have the transform, but this time instead of 0 degree, we want to have 720 degree in both sides. Y-axis and x-axis, we're going to have these two. So we have this animation now. We want to add it to the dice now. So to the dice, we want to have some animation duration for 1 second. but we want this one to be infinite. So we want to just say animation fill mode to be forwards, which is going to be infinite. But in JavaScript, we want to remove this animation after a few seconds. So I'm going to show you how to do it. So now we have this animation inside the CSS. Let's add it using JavaScript. So inside the JavaScript, we have to add that animation. This is very simple. We just need to bring this dice element inside the HTML. We know that the dice element, it's a div with the ID of dice. So we can bring it here at the top. We create a constant, call it dice element, and this is going to be equal to, similar to the above, like a document dot get element by ID, and the ID is called dice. So now we have this element. We just can add that animation to it by using dot class list dot add. This is going to add that class list, which was role animation, role dot dash animation. So basically we have added this role animation class to this element now. So if you now press this button, we see the animation. Okay, but this is only working one time. So we want to add this, and after a few 1 second we want to remove that. So we can just add a set timeout here, which is going to trigger this function after 1 second, which is 1000 milliseconds. And this function is going to, we just copy this one, and instead of add, we want to remove it. So we just say remove. After 1 second, we're going to remove that. So if I click, it's going to remove it, and then we can just click again, click again, click again. As you can see, now we have the animation in our dice, but we want to just randomly change this dice. So we're going to call a function after removing this called roll dice. And we need to create this function here at the top. So we create a function called roll dice. So this is how we do it. We create a random number between 1 and 6 each time. And then we're going to, based on this number, we're going to show different dice face. So this is just a 5. For example, if the next number is 4, we're going to show the die face 4. So first we create the random number. So we just call it, we create a constant, we call it roll result, which is going to be, we just create a random number first. This is going to create a random number between 1 and 0, but we can multiply this one to 6. So which is going to be from 0 and 6. But we don't want the numbers like 0.2 or 0.3 or 1.5. We want a rounded number. So we can just cover this one inside a parenthesis and then just use a method called math.floor. So this is going to create a number between 0 and 5 actually. So this is going to create because floor is going to bring it to the bottom. Now we just need to add 1 to it to create the number between 1 and 6. This is the one way. The other way was we use math.cl. So this is going to create 1 to 6. So math.floor is going to round it to the lower number, and then we just need to add 1 to it to create a random number between 1 and 6. So we can console log now the roll result. So let's see. If we click on this, we're going to see a number. And now we got 2. Next time we get 3, 4, 5. It's going to be always between 1 and 6. Okay. So we are creating this number now. Now we want to, based on this number, change the dice face. So I'm going to create another constant called dice face, which is going to call a function called get dice face. And we want to pass this number, rolled result. So let's create this function. We create a function here called get dice face, which is going to get this number, and based on this number is going to change and return that face, that dice face. So we need to create a switch here. I want to show you how to use the switch. So the switch is going to get an input, and based on the input, we're going to have an output. So here we have the switch. In case the number is 1, this is going to return the 1, which is here. If you remember, we need to have the Unicode. So for the phase 1, let's search here. So dive phase 5, let's search for dive phase 1. So the Unicode for this one is this. For HTML, I'm going to return this. Okay. And in case of 2, we're going to return 2. So I'm going to paste the, so let's search for the dive phase 2. Okay. So we just need to keep going, create this until 6. So for the, in case we have 3, we're going to return the dice 3. So let's search for dice 3. I'm going to use my Ctrl V, dice 3. So let's continue. For the case 4, we're going to return. Okay, 4 is this one. So 2 more left. Case 5, we're going to return dice phase 5. And finally, for the case 6, we're going to return the 6th one. So I'm going to just search for the 6. Okay, so this is the 6. And for the default, you need to add a default if you want to use a switch. So any other cases, we're going to return just an empty string. Okay, so this is how the way the switch works. So based on the input, we're going to return an output. So it can be 1 to 6, and we return different phases here. So now we have this one. Now we have the dice phase. So if I console log dice phase here, so each time we roll a dice, we return a dice phase instead of number now, as you can see. Okay, so we got this dice phase. Now we want to change this dice element text content to dice phase. So we just say dice element dot text content. We want to change it to this dice phase. So now if I change this one, we see this number. Okay. But we want to see I think we need to, instead of this one, we use inner HTML. So let's check. Okay, now we see the dive phase. So instead of text content, you use inner HTML. So each time we see a different dice. Okay, so we have done this part, but we haven't completed this history yet because the history is always the same. So we need to change the history and save each dice roll. So I'm going to create a constant, create a variable here called history list. And this is going to be an empty array. And we're going to update this empty array each time we click on this one. And we're going to add the information we have. So each time we change the inner HTML of this one, we're going to update the history list. So we just say history list. We're going to add the new one by just saying dot push, and we add this roll result. Okay, which can be 1, 2, 3, or anything like that. And then we can just update, create a function called update roll history. Okay, now let's create this function. So we're going to create a function called update history. So the function name is update history, update roll history. I put it here. So update history is going to, first thing first, make this one completely empty. So we're going to have this roll history first. So this roll history, we need to bring it inside the JavaScript, which includes all the list. So here at the top, I'm going to bring that one using a constant, and we call that one roll history element. And this is going to be equal to document.getElementById, and the ID for this one is role-history. So first thing first, we're going to empty that one. So here inside this function, we're going to say role history element dot inner HTML is going to be empty first. So each time we click, we're going to empty this one first, okay? And then we're going to fill it with the everything we have inside the history list, which is going to save here each time, okay? So we create a for loop. We just create a for loop. We create a variable called I here, which is going to start from 0, and this is going to continue until this history list length. For example, it can be 1, it can be 2, 3, and etc. And then we're going to increase this I 1 each time for this loop. And for this loop, we're going to create the list item. So we're going to create this list item here in each loop. So we're going to say list item, which is going to be equal to, we can create it using a method called createElement. So we just target the document, and then we just say create element, and the element we want to create is li, which is the list. Now we have created, we want to change the inner HTML of it. So we just say list item dot inner HTML, and this is going to be dynamic. So we need to add a backtick. Backtick is located on the tab key. It's not the single quote actually. Okay, it's backtick. So we're going to say role. We want to say role 1, role 2, but the role 1 and role 2 is going to be based on this I. Okay, because I starts from 0, we need to add 1 to it. So we just create a variable. We just say I plus 1. Because I starts from 0, now we want to start from 1. And after that, we're going to have a span. And inside this span, we're going to have that this face, which we can get from getting from this get dice face. So we're going to create another variable. We just say get, we call this get dice face function, and we're going to pass this, we have the number here, history list. We have saved all the numbers inside the history list by just passing the role result. So we're going to just say history list, but we want the number I. For example, the first one, second one, the third one, we pass this I, and then we get the face and then show it inside this span. So we're going to close this span now. So add the closing tag here. Now we have created the list item. So we need to add it to the role history. So we just made the role history empty. Now we can just add this element to it by just using append child. So append child is going to add this element. So we add this element to role history elements, which is this element here. We have this element here. We have appended these childs to this element. So now we've done it using JavaScript. So if I click now, we see that the first, now we have 2. If I click again, we can see the next one is added to the list. Now the third one, we can keep going, see each one, and then the number is updated here as well using the role number. And the other thing is, when we refresh the page, first we see these 2. We can just delete these 2 now, or we just comment it using control /. So now we don't see any list, but when we click on the roll dice, we see the first one, second one, and third one. So what we do here, I'm going to explain again. We just created an empty array called history list. Each time we create a random number, we're going to add that number to this variable inside its array by using .push, and then we're going to create the element, li element here based on that number, and add it as a child to the unordered list item. So that was it for the JavaScript part of the project. I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. In these projects, we have worked on some difficult tasks like updating the history, creating an animation, and how to add and use the append child to add some element to another element. So I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. See you in the next project.